Hello and welcome to my Learning and Motivation Theories in the Classroom midterm project for EDPS390. My name is Brendan Mead and this is my submission. I have prepared a presentation that shouldn't take more than a couple of minutes to give. Feel free to reach out to me via email if you have any questions, comments, or concerns about my presentation, and I hope you enjoy. All right, let's go ahead and get started here. So the first slide that I have is all about the characteristics that students are showing in schools today. I'm going to primarily focus on the high school aspects, so keep that in mind. I am a chemistry education major, so a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about are also going to be related to the world of science, the world of chemistry. So again, keep that in mind as well. But yeah, first object that I would like to talk about is actually going to be about collaboration and social skills. So I think that in the world of science and in science education, it is super duper important that students are able to grow in the world of the lab. In the lab, a lot of what we do is collaborate with each other. We are bouncing ideas off of each other. We are trying to come up with different hypotheses together, test out those hypotheses. And I think that's a great thing to do in the high school setting. It gets your kids' critical thinking skills going. It gets them to just absolutely thrive together. And it grows your overall culture in your classroom. It's building those relationships between student and student. Those are just as important as relationships between teacher and student. If your students are comfortable with each other, then it creates a much more welcoming environment, which we'll talk about more later on in this presentation. Currently in schools, so like I have on this PowerPoint, I have seen, like I said, at the high school level, majority of students are wanting to work together. They're wanting to, talk to each other, help each other on homework assignments, etc., etc. And that's a really good basis and a really good start for the direction that I kind of want to take my own classroom into, which again thrives in that collaboration aspect. You still see social skills are developing, of course. It's high school. Our kids are growing in that field every single day. I do think that over the past 5 or so years, that we've seen those skills absolutely exponentially increase. They were at almost an all-time low during that 2019, 2020, 2021 era, and we're finally seeing that those kind of trends of bad social skills are really improving. And maybe that's just of my own observation. Like I said, this whole presentation is based off of things that I've seen within the classroom. So moving past that, we're going to hit another piece of information I think is super important to the science world, to the chemistry world specifically, and wrong direction. Technology and attention spans. So at first glance, technology and attention spans, why are those two linked together? Let's be real. High school students, they are consistently surrounded by almost any form of technology that they can get their hands on, whether it's school issued technology, Chromebooks, laptops, MacBooks, iPads, etc., or their own personal devices. You have iPhones, their own iPads, own tablets, blah 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 blah. And we see that these pieces of technology, they give these students access to information almost instantly. I mean, they have the entirety of anything on the internet at their fingertips at all times. And it really kind of has harmed, in my opinion, and it's been proven out there, attention spans are not what they used to be. We're taught that a student has about the same attention span in minutes as their age. So if I'm working with mainly high school sophomores and juniors, those are going to be anywhere from 14 to 16, maybe 14 to 17. So 14 to 17 minutes at a time for attention spans. Not exactly what it was when, I was in school. So going kind of bridging that technology is great. It has its place for sure, especially in science. Almost everything we do can be enhanced by some sort of technology, whether it's different, we call them spectroscopy measures, or just simple as computer simulations. Technology can be super great, but it has definitely made an impact on our students' attention spans, which really just means that you gotta have something to break up your class, something to reset those attention spans, which again, I'll talk about later. Let's see if I can slide this in the right direction. Perfect. Okay, so the next little thing that I want to talk about here, it's motivation. So, we've seen in classrooms in the past few years, motivation is extremely extrinsically in that direction. Motivated, I guess. Motivation's extrinsically motivated. You get what I'm trying to say here. We see that students are not exactly just motivated by the wanting to do well anymore. You still have those kids, those achievers, those kids that really just want to excel at everything they do. But you also have a lot of students who just kind of want to scrape by, unless there's something else involved. So there's a lot of different pieces in motivation. I think there's a lot of different pieces within the school that rely on your schooling. For example, in the state of Indiana, or in most states in the country, you have to have a certain grade in all of your classes in order to participate in different after-school activities, whether it's athletics or more academically centered after-school clubs and things like that. Which I would say that's extrinsic motivation. It's outside of just yourself wanting to be great. But I think that can change. I think that relationships affect motivation a lot. I'll talk about that here in a little bit. I know I keep saying that, and I'm going to say it a lot. I feel like most of my explanations will come with time here. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next piece of material I have here. See if I slide in the right direction. And that's problem solving skills. In science and chemistry, all we're doing almost every day solving problems. Now, I don't necessarily just mean math problems. I mean, critical thinking problems, application problems, thinking, hey, if this happens, why does that affect us on a daily basis? One of the biggest, chemistry pieces of that is, your basic, household items. Salt. Salt is a compound, a chemical compound. Hey, why does this topic, it could be bonding, it could be just nomenclature, which just means naming, but how do these different topics affect us on our everyday life? And we see that with those, developing problem-solving skills that students have, it's our jobs to build those up. So right in the current places of students, right now we see a lot of students just wanting to take the easy route. I'll be honest, I was the exact same way when I was in high school. I wanted to do the bare minimum I could to get an A in my class. And, short term, that's fine, right? But as educators, it's our jobs to want our students to grow more than just getting an A. We want them to see the value in what we're teaching them. Maybe not so much in the content realm, like for example, in chemistry, not very many of my students are going to go into a career where they need to know how to find the orbital notation of an element. But what they do need to know is how to solve a problem when it's presented to them, how to think through the process of solving a problem, how to identify the problem, how looking at those different pathways to get to the final solution that they want. And so that's something that I think almost all students can grow in. And we'll talk about ways to get there here in a little bit. Moving forward, we're going to have our do's and don'ts. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the do's first, start positive. So the first do that I have in order to kind of make all of this theory that we've talked about in this class really come to life, starting from all the way from day one in your classroom. If you really just want to have the kind of classroom where your students want to be there, they want to come in, they want to learn, and they want to be successful, the very first kind of from day one, you have to set some expectations. Expectations are, variable of things. They can be a whole lot of things. I'm just going to kind of hit on 3 expectations that I think every teacher should have in order for their classroom to really be a place where students are growing and learning on a daily basis. The first thing that I've got on my slide is keeping students engaged. I think that's something you can do from day one. So for example, most high school classes, day one, you start with the syllabus. You go through the syllabus, introduce yourself, introduce what the class is, what students are going to do, etc., etc. There's not a whole lot of ways to keep students engaged through that. They're just going to kind of be reading along with you in a syllabus. So I have already kind of planned for that by doing a sort of demo, a chemistry demo. It's called the Screaming Gummy Bear demo. It's awesome. If you haven't seen it, feel free to search it up. There's videos of it all over the place, but it's a great kind of, it's a loud, it's an explosion, it's a flash of light, and it just gets students kind of excited for chemistry. Like, hey, we're going to get to do a lot of fun stuff in this class. But then how do we carry that on through your everyday kind of classes? You can't just blow stuff up every day. It's just as simple as being fun, being exciting. One of my favorite teachers that I didn't necessarily get to shadow a lot of when I was in my practicum, but I visited her classroom a couple of days. She is one of the most energetic people I've ever met in my life. And you can really see how that impacted her classroom, her vibes, her culture. The kids got excited when they were going to that class. It was a math class, and it was even later in the day, so when students are really just wanting to go home, they'd come into her class all with smiles on their face. They'd be ready to go. They'd be active in the class. They'd be engaged in the class. And it was just as simple as having a good attitude, being positive, being uplifting. And that kind of brings me to my next point, which is creating positive relationships with students. I am somebody who believes that relationships mean everything in the educational world, from student-student, student-teacher, teacher administration, school and community. Positive relationships just change the entire name of the game. If you're able to create, I'm just going to kind of focus on the student-teacher relationships here. If you're able to create those relationships with your students early on, and we'll kind of talk about how to do that here in a little bit, it makes them want to work for you, which kind of helps with our whole, problem-solving skills that we talked about earlier, motivational skills we talked about earlier. If you're able to get your kids excited to come to your class, get your kids ready to work, get your kids ready to go, it just makes a world of difference, and you'll see that in terms of their output, in terms of their own beliefs in the classroom. It gives them a bit of, I'm not going to say freedom, but just a sense of belonging in the classroom, I guess. We can use that here. Next thing that I'm going to talk about is just mindsets, so overall classroom mindsets. In our class, EDPS390, we've talked a lot about growth mindsets versus closed mindsets. I believe that in science, there's always somewhere to go. I never think that you're just, even if you know everything, there's still more for you to know. So having that growth mindset, I think, kind of starts from the instructor giving lots and lots of positive, constructive feedback. telling and giving your students responsive feedback as well is super duper important. Giving them somewhere to go. It's setting goals for your students. If you've got a student who, might be struggling with one topic, but they're willing to put in the work, then, I think the teacher is able to kind of sit down with that student, help them put in the work with them, and say, hey, maybe we're right here at this level. By the end of the week, hey, let's be at this level. And we just keep going until we get it, right? That's just examples of how I think the teacher can implement those sorts of growth mindsets. If the teacher himself or herself doesn't have the ability to really want to grow with the students, then the students aren't going to want to grow at the same time, right? So that kind of pushes me forward into my don'ts here. The classroom don'ts are a topic that, I guess I forgot to put the transitions on my slide here, a topic that really just makes you question a lot of things. They're kind of the opposites to the do's, in the sense of they will push you in the complete wrong direction with your classroom. So the first one I've got up here is make yourself the sole voice in the class. By making yourself the sole voice in the class, first things first, your students are going to learn to tune you out really quickly, which is going to hurt that attention span. Is going to kind of feed into that, where, we said earlier in this presentation that you only have so many minutes at a time with each student before they start to kind of fall back. Try and get your kids to get involved with you. Engage them in the lesson, whether it's just having them help you solve a problem. In chemistry, it's pretty math heavy at times. Having them come up to the board and work a problem out. Or it's doing group work in the middle of the lesson. When you're doing an example problem, have your students work together, come up with a solution, and then you can work it out as a class. There's different ways to get everybody engaged in a lesson, and I think that's just one really good way to not be the sole voice in the class. And then we have ignoring the voices of the students. So what do I mean by this? Number one is don't be a dictator. We've talked a lot about in some of the other educational classes here at Ball State how, we want to kind of teach our students young that, hey, they have a voice, and hey, that voice matters. It counts for something. Introduce that into your classroom. Whether it's just hearing your students out about where they're at with the content. Just because you want them to be here doesn't necessarily mean that they are yet. And so you might have to rearrange your plans. It might be as simple as, hey, in our other classes this week, we have a lot going on. Is there any way that we could maybe adjust our schedule a little bit in this class so that we aren't as chaotically and slammed as we are right now? So just those little things that really, at the end of the day, don't make a huge impact. But for the students, it can mean a lot. And that will also play into that relationship building where the students know, hey, I can bring my problems to my teacher here, and they'll be able to at least help me out, point me in the right direction, give me some advice, so we can keep on working hard and pushing forward, right? And that kind of, again, feeds into that last point I have on screen where it says prioritize content over students' well-being. In terms of just content versus students, we think about this in terms of, the Maslow's hierarchy and zone of proximal development and whatnot, where sometimes just pushing through content is just going to start harming your students instead of helping them. It's super duper important to, check in with your kids. Say, hey, where are we at? Figure out if we're in a good spot to move on, or if we need to, stay where we're at, or even fall back a little bit and revisit some things. So things to consider, and just really good ideas of good practice and bad practice, I guess, in terms of your do's and don'ts. But that kind of brings me into my next box, which is all about how we can apply some of the things that I've talked about inside of the real world. So we've got relationship building in the classroom. It starts on day one. It's getting to know students' names, putting faces to names, figuring out, hey, what are we involved with? What are some things that we do? Which leads us to the rest of the bullet points that I have under this subtopic, getting involved in the schools. So once you figure out what your students are involved with, maybe it's going to some of their events outside of the school. Maybe it's bringing some of those events into, whether it's just examples in your classroom or whether you're able to pull a topic from something that the students are interested in into the class. For example, if you're at a really big ag school, so FFA, and you're able to include that inside of your own classroom, that can mean a lot for a lot of students. It gives them a kind of bridge to say, hey, I know a lot about this, and if I'm able to bring this into my class and bring that into my topics, then it can help them keep and stay interested in it as well. So, relationships. They're the key to success for a teacher. The more that you know a student, and the closer that they feel with you, the more that they're willing to work for you, the more that they're going to want to show up to your class, be active, be engaged. And when something's going on with them, the more likely they are to come, hey, have that kind of sit down conversation and say, hey, can I talk to you about X, Y, and Z? At the end of the day, we're here for the students, whether it's educational or trying to get them some help that they may need. All of that relationship building kind of comes into this next bullet point, which is making a classroom a welcoming environment. So we've talked about different ways on how to do this. One of the best ways that I have found that worked for me when I was practicuming is being predictable. Don't surprise your kids with things that, don't seem normal. If the students are able to come in and expect what to do, the more likely, they are to just do it. For example, if you're the kind of teacher who, at the start of a lesson always puts supplies needed for the day on the board, do that every day. That way your kids know exactly what to do, where to look, and what to get out for their lesson for that day. Or if you have like a kind of set rotational schedule throughout the week where maybe it's a PowerPoint on Monday and Wednesday, whether it's a lab or a group work project on Tuesday, Thursdays, and then Fridays is something else. Do that. It just helps, like I said, students feel comfortable coming into your classroom so that they know what to kind of expect, what to do. They're not being caught off guard by seeing something new every single day, which can also just be a lot less stressful for the teacher. If you just know what you're going to do on this day, just let your kids know too. Let the kids know ahead of time. Say, hey, this is what we're doing today. Hey, get this stuff out. It's a lot less stressful for everybody that way. Another piece that kind of falls both into making that classroom a welcoming environment, but can also help build up those relationships, is being positive and uplifting. So maybe it's just saying, hey, to all of your students as they walk in the classroom, or talking to students about something that they did after school, whether it's, hey, you did a really nice job in the baseball game last night, or hey, how did your play go? Things like that, getting them talking about things that make them happy and celebrating those accomplishments with them, especially if it's a bigger, kind of deal. Next thing that I've got kind of escapes that realm of relationship and environmental building, and we're going to go into creativity here. So with creativity, especially in science, we're all about finding new ideas, creating new hypotheses, trying to develop independent thinkers in the classroom. We want kids to be able to think for themselves at the end of the day. We want them to be able to look at a problem, and we want them to be able to think through it, and we want them to be able to use their knowledge that they've learned, whether it's previous or newly gained knowledge, in order to come up with a solution. We talk about that a lot in lab skills. So with labs, we want students to be prompted, but we don't want to exactly tell them everything we want them to do or exactly what they're looking at. We want them to be able to, whether it's making some sort of new solution through a reaction based off of what they see or what they smell or what they saw, we want them to tell us what they are doing, what they're looking at. For example, if they make a really, really pretty royal blue color in a solution, that might mean they did something with copper. And so we want them to be able to kind of think through that, which kind of leads into those independent thinkers, that critical thinking aspect of education that we are really, really trying to grow and develop. And then the last thing that I have is teach content in different ways. So I just kind of talked about how we could do that in labs. Labs are a really good way that's outside of your traditional kind of PowerPoint lecture series. Not saying that we shouldn't ever use PowerPoints and lecture series, time and a place for sure. But just getting them exposed to content in multiple different ways, well, A, you're going to end up appealing to a lot of different learning styles that way, but also B, you're going to be able to reinforce a lot of ideas in those different ways. Especially like in chemistry, we have those labs that I keep talking about. A lot of the times we will use labs to either introduce a topic or we will use it to reinforce a topic at the end. With lecture series in between, that way we're kind of showing our students actually what's happening and what we're talking about. We're letting them be a little more hands-on by doing those topics and content areas that we're talking about, but also we're able to kind of sit down, discuss a lot more about them, and talk a lot more of the theory behind it as well. That's the presentation that I have prepared today. His name's Aspen. He's a chemistry talented rooster. This is just kind of something that I put at the end of all my PowerPoints that I make that involve education. Even the ones that I use for my own practicum series, so actual PowerPoints that are presented to students. It's just something fun, and it just kind of allows our students to maybe laugh a little bit, which can really create a positive environment. So that just kind of plays into the rest of that PowerPoint presentation that I just gave. So anywhoosies, that's all I have for you today. Like I said at the beginning, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to reach out, and thank you for watching.